All right, hey guys, Jenna from Justuno here, and I am joined with X from Essence of Email. Hey X,
Hey Jenna, nice to join you today here for this webinar.
how are you doing?
Pretty good, just staying busy here.
And sorry, where are you joining us from again today? I know we were chatting a little bit earlier before we hopped on the recording, but I forgot to ask you.
Yeah. So I'm in Europe right now. Actually, I'm sitting here in Kiev in Ukraine, so it's like freezing outside.
Oh my
Like
goodness.
yeah, like 3 feet of snow outside. It's wonderful. I'm missing the sunny times.
Probably haven't seen the sun in days. Yeah, I'm traveling, so I'm in Texas right now, and it's about 80 degrees, so it's a nice break from the snow that I have been in. So,
So
anyways,
jealous.
yeah. Well, thanks for making time. Today we're going to be talking, guys, about the recipe for a perfect email. So again, I'm from Just Uno, and if you guys are not a Just Uno user, what we are is a data-driven CRO tool. So a lot of you probably know us more for our pop-ups, but we actually work with leads across all stages of your funnel, and I'm going to get into that today. We'll talk about acquisition through nurturing, all the way up into conversion, and that's why we kind of wanted to pull in somebody with expertise on email. We have a lot of questions from our customers, of course, since we capture that email address. Hey, what do I do with it now? So that's why we brought in X. And X, can you tell us a little bit about your agency? I know that we've been partners for quite a while, so why don't you let everybody know kind of what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Essence of Email, we're a digital marketing agency, but our bread and butter is specifically the email marketing channel. And also we work primarily with e-commerce stores to boot. So throughout our existence, that's kind of where our niche really fell. So we're very much email geeks over here and have been very focused on channel, which of course also touches many other sub channels or other software partners that we have, like Justuno, which really help us drive the email strategy part to the next level and get a lot of success for our clients.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad you said you guys are email geeks, because when I saw the deck and the stuff that X put together, I was like, wow, we're getting pretty nitty gritty today. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Cool. Yeah, so let's talk about what you guys are going to get for showing up. So a cool thing that we're going to offer you from the Just Uno side is our holiday calendar. And what this is just a compilation of all the different marketing holidays that you have a chance to take advantage of. And we'll talk about how to implement that too later. But this just kind of gives you an overview and gives you some insight too into kind of what customers are looking for around the holiday times. So again, we can get into that a little bit later, but you guys will be able to grab that at the end of the presentation. And then X, it looks like you guys have a few guides that you're going to offer, correct?
Yep, that's right. We have a couple of guides on the link that we'll send over there. And they look at a couple of things. For example, complementary to your holiday calendar, also a holiday email marketing checklist, as well as a deeper look into a few of the more effective campaigns and automations that we've seen work for our retailers.
Awesome. Okay. Good deal. I'm not sure if I went into full screen. Sorry, I forgot to be in present mode, but if our faces have gone away, then I apologize, but we'll focus on the slides now. So let's go ahead and get into, what we want to talk about today. Before we get into the action items though, I think what I'd like to do is have X talk kind of about what I'd like to call like the litmus test, or understanding how, if your emails suck or not. So X, why don't you go ahead and take it from here?
Yep, sure. So first of all, like there are many components. You'll be surprised how many details that go into an effective email, both as a standalone email, and then of course there's a whole strategy behind it and how you execute against the tactics. But here, what we have is basically like three quick and dirty warning signs to look for inside your emails to see if at least you're getting the most out of them. So here we just pulled a random example where essentially you're seeing a print catalog that's jammed together as an email, which of course is both unreadable and also not very conducive to click-throughs or the three that we mentioned here are effectively looking and making sure that your email is rendering correctly and specifically having a focus on mobile displays, tablet displays, and such, because based on our experience, the number of views and opens and reads that come off of mobile now far eclipses desktop for the most part. Most of our clients are sitting either at like a 50-50 distribution or well above that. So we have clients that are 80-90% skewed towards mobile views.
Wow.
So yeah, absolutely. And it's a trend that's been going on for years, where it's like shifting off desktop and shifting more and more onto mobile. So that's the number one thing to look for, to really be cognizant of the mobile experience, because if your email doesn't show up correctly on mobile, then oftentimes that's just going to trigger immediate delete. So make sure to look for that. And then number two is being aware of your use of images, and also the user experience when images are turned off or blocked. So even though a lot of the ISPs are kind of moving towards being able to show more images by default, I know Gmail is big on this, and
they're notorious for that, right?
Yeah, I remember the industry was in a little bit of upheaval whenever Gmail makes a change. So with that said, there's still like a variety of different email clients out there. So that do block images by default. So what you want to be aware of is, if you have a very image heavy email, to be aware, like to stylize the alt text, to optimize it a bit, so where there could be more text driven elements, to make that more HTML text versus purely images. And also help your image to text ratio, which can help with spam filters as well.
Oh, good deal. I had no idea about that. So what you're saying there is that if you add alt text, that could potentially filter your email from being marked as spam.
Yeah, well, alt text, and also just having more regular text in the body copy and such. Yeah,
okay.
Because oftentimes, like if you think from the standpoint of a spammer, right? Like if you kind of hide your intentions through images and don't have any other indicative properties there, then you're trying to game the system, right? So not the most important thing. There's a lot of things surrounding deliverability and spam filtering that you want to take into account, but nevertheless important, even from a user experience standpoint. I'm oftentimes getting emails because I default images off just to see how the retailers are sending, if they're cognizant of it. So a lot of times I'm getting otherwise like beautiful emails, but they're not optimized for image just off. So what I get is like a blank email or at most like one tiny hyperlink blue piece of alt text that is not stylized at all. So if you imagine people who may not even be aware that you can turn on images, right? Because that's an additional consumer step, that could be a bad experience.
Right. They might just think like, why am I getting this blank email?
Precisely. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And then finally there, poor email design and copies. So obviously the content of your email is going to be a huge driver on getting people to your site to click through and ultimately to purchase. So really being aware of the design, the layout, the copy, which I was alluding to in point one actually with the mobile part, but really being aware of that and making sure it's readable, it's clickable. You want to make your buttons very obvious, or your calls to action very obvious. The hyperlinking your text, making it underline, kind of the usability, from the usability standpoint, following some best practices there. That's very, very good for creating an effective email. And on the converse, if you have poor design and copy, it's definitely going to affect your click-through rates and ultimately conversions.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I can see a stark contrast between this example you're showing us here and then what we have here on this next slide. I mean, obviously this email looks very optimized for mobile, but it's just so much more user friendly.
Yep, absolutely. And what you can see here is like very nice, crisp font, web safe. You have the background blue. And what's interesting here is they were able to seamlessly meld the background that's behind the text and then the image below. So what that allows you to do is actually code text directly on top of the HTML blue background, and then the image itself is also kind of overlaid there. So when these pairs of shoes are not visible, the email still looks great. So, and also the button below where shop collection, that there's a way to code it so that's actually HTML bulletproof button as well. So you actually get the majority of the aesthetic gist of this email, even with images off. So definitely a stark contrast there.
Yeah, it looks great. Well, I guess let's talk here a little bit. I know that you have some stats here. I'd like you to run through these, and I just really want to hammer home of why email matters. And that sounds maybe kind of like an obvious point, but us being historically an email acquisition tool, uh, you would be so surprised at how people still don't understand essentially how effective this channel is. So I'd like to hear you talk about it, because you guys work in email. We work in pop-ups and nurturing. So let's go through these numbers that you have here.
Yep, sure. So some stats that we compiled both from some industry sources, but also cross-referencing our own data. So basically, email has been around forever, but nevertheless still holds a good place as a powerhouse for actually driving conversions. And so the main stat there is really looking at the percentage of revenue from emails. So across the board, you're seeing right around 22-23% of revenue of total e-commerce store revenue for, let's say, pure play e-commerce stores, right? If you have bricks and mortar, it's a little bit different distribution. But for those e-commerce retailers, like you're seeing right around that percentage of revenue coming from the email channel for a more or less optimized email program. Now that's just kind of a base average benchmark. So you're going to, depending on your composition of audience, what you're selling, average order values and all of that, you might be below or above it. And oftentimes we're seeing revenue percentages be way above that, especially in peak seasons such as holidays, where for certain clients we've seen that topple over 50, almost 60% of revenue in like November. Wow. Where Black Friday and Cyber Monday hit towards the tail end there. So with that said, like a couple other things here, just open rates, click rates, open rates hovering right around the low 20%. On average, and there's room, depending on how clean your list is and what kind of strategies you employ and how much you segment, to really be well above that. But that's what we see off of like kind of a mass undifferentiated send to your main actives list. Generally around 21% open rate, 2.5% click rate, and that's click divided by number sent. I know there's different interpretations. Sometimes you can say click divided by opens, which would be significantly higher. And then some conversion rates there too, broken down by dividing across number of email sent versus number of people actually arrive on your website. So you can see like that latter metric being really pretty high. So once you get people onto your site from an email, the purchase intent is actually quite high. So you're converting like between a fifth and a quarter of those visitors.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to get into later and kind of show you guys exactly how to convert more from the emails and using site messaging and things to leverage that intention that you said that they have. One newbie question, X. So when you were talking about open rate and stuff like that, you mentioned someone having a clean list. So for people who aren't familiar, can you just kind of define what that means?
Yes, absolutely. So a clean list essentially means the main list that you're sending to your mass emails to, right? That it is composed of people who are likely to open and not composed of people who are very dormant. So effectively, with any list with Justuno, as you're, getting new subscribers and growing that list, right? Ultimately, over time, what happens is you're going to start accumulating some dead weight on the list, whether because they, subscribed and, change email addresses, or they just start becoming not interested. You're going to accumulate some of the dead weight. And this is very important, actually, both from a performance standpoint, but also from a deliverability standpoint, that the email clients and ISPs look at the engagement rates on your emails to determine how good your sender reputation is, and thus how well they're going to deliver your emails into the inbox versus spam box. So to keep a clean list essentially means evaluating the behavior of your core list and identifying the dormant contacts who may not have opened or engaged with their emails for a long time, let's say like 6 months, a year, or even longer than that, and making efforts to both bring them back on the list, but also to identify the ones who truly are dormant and actually scrub them from your subsequent email sends.
Okay. So, I mean, it's really like a true housekeeping item. And I think, and maybe you can speak to this too, but don't most ESPs offer some sort of alert for that? Or do you guys actually recommend scrubbing as as a quarterly practice, a yearly practice? Is that something that is very important to you?
Yeah, so it really depends on the functionality of your ESP. Almost all of the major ones that I know of, right, they both give you a readout on just straight up unresponsive contacts, dormant contacts, engaged contacts. But also, what we like to do is actually just straight up create the segments based on our own criteria, which oftentimes looks backwards on historical open rates, historical click rates, how long they've been a subscriber, and take on multiple facets of it and to construct a segment of people who identify as dormant. And then from there, depending on your functionality, we usually do at the start of like a lot of our engagements, we do a manual scrub first. So sending a couple of manual campaigns to this dormant list and to initially get those guys out. But
Mm-hmm.
then afterwards, if you have this function, we actually automate that process as well. So we create these basically a criteria for dormancy, and once someone trips that and gets added to a segment, then they get the automated flow. And if they don't engage at any point in the flow, then they get put on a dormant list, which you just clean out, or sometimes with your ESP, you can actually automatically remove them just straight from there.
Unsubscribe them. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you guys who are like, hey, I can't convert from email. I mean, there are a lot of different reasons why that might be happening, but what X just described could certainly be one of them, especially if you have a big and an old list. So I think that would definitely be a strategy, to look at once you have determined, hey, that might be the cause. But not to derail us too much, that's not what we're going to talk about today. Another reason, obviously, that your emails probably aren't converting is because they are just kind of missing the mark on overall design, optimization, segmentation as well. So X is here today to tell us the perfect recipe. So X, I'll go ahead and let you take it from here and kick it off, I guess, with just walking us through these steps, and then we'll get into it.
Yep. So yeah, the perfect recipe that you'll ever need, right? But basically identifying a couple of main points here that we've seen to be big points of leverage for a lot of email programs. And really it breaks down to three main things here. So with segmentation, optimization, and calls to action. So effectively on the segmentation side, we've seen some companies really struggle with this. And really when on pretty much every test we've done, right? Like the more segmented you can get with your messaging and your timing and everything around that, the better response on a per email basis you're going to get, right? Which makes sense, right? If as a consumer I get emails that are not relevant to my needs at that time or ever, then I'm less likely to engage. I'm less likely to convert. I'm more likely to unsubscribe. So focusing on segmentation is a big part of effective email program. And based on what your ESP can do too, there's a ton that you can do there. A lot of times we focus, how I like to break it down on a beginner level is really looking at using your automations to do a lot of that hyper targeting, a lot of the segmentation to start with, and then slowly seeding into dividing up your main list to be a couple of segments, because there's a lot more work on the manual campaign side to put together one-time campaigns over and over again. So when you do have multiple segments there, that kind of duplicates some of that work. So you want to start at the easiest and highest point of leverage, which is the automations, which inbuilt to themselves, there's that piece of targeting and segmentation. But off of that too, we see a lot of email programs kind of just send willy-nilly, which is not a bad place to start, honestly, because you rather get off the ground. But after you get some of the main automation set up, you have a schedule for your campaigns, you're on the roll there, then this is a core piece to really fine-tune your email marketing program, because basically with optimization, we're talking about A/B testing. Because you can A/B test on campaigns, you can A/B test on automations. The types that you want to do for each actually vary in terms of what's most effective and what's most reproducible in the long run. But nevertheless, like adopting this mindset of like optimizing and constantly testing something new with email is really really critical, because those little incremental lifts that you get can really really compound over time. So we really suggest having a very robust optimization strategy, especially after you have the core initial pieces in place.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, with call to action, I think this one bears, without speaking, but having effective promotions, effective angles, and specifically effective well, sometimes they'll have to be a big giant button. Like obviously,
Right.
it depends on your brand, right? If you're a super upscale brand, you don't really want a big flashing red button there. But nevertheless, kind of having the idea that email really is this powerful enabler for driving people to your site, to specific product pages, specific landing pages, and utilizing that to get as much traffic and targeted traffic as possible at the right time. So then they can go on and convert. Of course, you will have to have a nice post-click experience, which I'm sure we'll get to later into this presentation.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. I mean, the one thing I do like that you called out here is to kind of take it step by step. So we also face sort of the same response, even with our own site, in terms of like thinking about, oh my gosh, we need to set up this test and this test. And A/B tests a lot of times seem pretty daunting and overwhelming. But I think you're right. Like once you have this initial piece set up of segmentation, it's like, okay, let's move to making that better. And once you set up your first A/B test, then after that, it's kind of all downhill, and you'll feel a lot more comfortable. They won't seem as intimidating, and you'll know exactly what criteria you want to use to set those up. So I like the advice of starting slow and just, accomplishing one step and then moving on to the next one. Okay, let's move on and talk about design. So this is the piece out of this whole presentation that I'm most interested in. So I'm super curious to hear what tips you have to give us about design.
Yep, absolutely. So this is a fairly heavy slide. There's a lot going on. There's some labels, and then there's this like the image, which we actually have the full email that's smaller off on the right hand side, and then broken down a little bit bigger so we can see it.
For sure.
It's effectively cut it in half. So the first piece I want to point to is kind of the different areas of the email. So from email professional standpoint, we kind of break it down based on the layout on different pieces. So first of all, there's a pre-header area, which is that little teal bar that Jenna's hovering over, which is an area that you'll see on a lot of emails for good reason. So number one, it gives you like a small opportunity to kind of promote, either dropping in some coupon codes, promoting free shipping or some other incentive up there. A lot of brands also like to put like view online, so people can click on the online version if the email isn't showing up for some reason. But even off of that, probably the most important piece of the pre-header, or most important function rather, is it actually gets pulled in as secondary supporting text in a lot of the email inboxes. Mm-hmm. So on top of your subject line, which is kind of the big bold piece, when you look into your email inbox, it also pulls the first part of the email text in there as a supporting text. So when you have pre-header, it actually gives you additional opportunity to drive the open. And to support your subject line and really to get people curious enough to open your email itself. So pre-headers are like kind of one of those elements that's like easily overlooked, but actually fairly important in actually getting the open initially. Off of that, we have kind of your logo, which is fairly standard. Most brands want to put their logo either front and center there, or maybe aligned left, or whatever you want to do aesthetically, but having your branding up top there, not super overwhelming, right? You don't want to take like half the page, but still having it up there so the consumer is clearly exposed to your brand there and able to build loyalty. But right below, or sometimes it's actually aligned to the right or to the left, it doesn't matter that much, just depends on the layout aesthetics. That's your header navigation. So this is another one of those like small things that's actually fairly important. The experience is a little bit different too, based on if you're seeing on mobile versus desktop. For example, on mobile, sometimes we might actually hide that because it's just it's smaller. if we stack it, sometimes it takes up too much room up top, whereas you ultimately want your hero image, which we'll talk about next, front and center. But we actually still see a lot of conversions coming off of desktop. In fact, desktop conversions still outpace mobile conversions, even though mobile views are significantly higher. So a lot of times what you're seeing is probably a consumer looking on their phone and then later purchasing on their desktop or laptop. So that header navigation, oftentimes we want that to really be key shopping pages on your site. And why that is because oftentimes when you're sending an email, you might have the core theme of the email that, let's say you're promoting one specific piece of clothing, right? Like one dress or a couple pieces. That doesn't necessarily appeal to the entirety of your subscriber base. So what happens is we actually see a lot of click through. Often, I think like on average, probably around 15% of total clicks happening on that little header navigation bar, right?
Wow,
So
okay.
that's actually fairly significant.
Pretty decent, yeah.
Exactly. And off of that too, we see a lot of email conversions and sales happen not necessarily on that particular featured product, especially if you have a wide range of products. We see it coming off of like random other categories. So in that wider with header navigation onto more shoppable, more like category or subcategory pages that are popular is very effective in driving ultimate sales.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, just speaking from my personal experience, like, there's been instances where I've bought a gift for my husband and I'll get an email from the brand who obviously sells other products as well. But if they have a women's link, then usually I absolutely shop it and think, okay, they'll probably have something cool for me too. So yeah, that makes sense to make those, like you said, shoppable pages. I think that's a good tip.
Yeah. In a sense, it functions a little bit like the navigation on site because people do try to click and filter and go from there. So, so it helps out there. And
Cool.
then from there, you kind of get into your core messaging, right? Which is embodied probably like 90% of the time or more, right? In that square,
Right.
that square we have stories that we have going there. And usually it's very much like a front and center, large splash image or what we call a hero image with your main call to action embedded in there and main messaging, right? So if you have a promo sale or you have, in this case, dresses for days, which is a theme, right? All of that's front and center in a large hero image there. So that's fairly intuitive. Depending on your brand and how you want to structure it, you might have actually like buttons or clear call to action directly in the image, or in this case, actually below in that body copy area. Where it's more text-based, but then you have the shop dresses that is right underneath there with the caret sign there, I believe they're coding that in text, which is alluding back to earlier when we were mentioning optimizing for text. So that's another key piece there. And then off of there, we're really looking at kind of product rows or other sort of like secondary banners. So it's E or H on my little grid there. So really looking at, in this case, they actually have like 4 featured dresses in a very like nice staggered layout there. But even after that, they have a complete to look section for complementary products, which I'm not sure actually if that's dynamic for them necessarily, but a lot of ESPs nowadays, actually, you're able to have dynamic product recommendation rows. So it's generated based on a variety of factors for that particular subscriber. So if they have a purchase history, it looks back. It's all driven by algorithms, right? So it looks back at their past purchase history, looks at perhaps what they're reviewing on the site, and then just compiles a list of recommendations based on that. And sometimes you have additional filters that you can put for bestsellers or excluding certain collections and things like that. So obviously, that goes in the same vein of segmentation and targeting, where if you can show the right products there in front of your subscribers on a subscriber by subscriber basis, then that's going to be super helpful for getting them on the site, interested, and ultimately purchasing.
Yeah, there are a lot of elements to this email, but I would agree that the design looks super clean. And I think if you could pull in some recommendations, once you do get that click through to site, then you will see some nice engagement. And that's kind of what I wanted to, show from our end on this side. X, you mentioned the revenue being pretty crazy from email for some of your clients over Black Friday, Cyber Monday, right? I mean, I think
Absolutely.
that's pretty obvious. You can assume that. But this is just a graph of kind of what we saw on our end from our customers. And I'd really like to point out this email section. But this is data from this year's Cyber 5 or Black Friday season. And the blue bar is representing people who clicked through from an email to site and did not see any type of on-site offer or engagement opportunity. And then the green bar here is for those that did click through from the email and did engage with some type of offer. And what that means in our language is just seeing something from Justuno or not. So you can see the increase in conversions, and the difference between those two segments is quite strong. And I think it makes a lot of sense, especially after looking at X's previous slide here. I mean, if you're going to go through the work to really tailor an email to your audience and put resources toward that channel and really make it optimized for conversion, then you're really dropping the ball if you send them to the site and there's nothing there to speak to mirror what you're saying in that email. And that's what we're going to talk about here and later on in the presentation as well. But this is just an example from a current Essence of Email client, Food to Live. And X, sent us over an email that they designed, and you can see in their hero image, they call out the discount, save 15% on healthy foods. And then what they have also set up for the client in Justuno is mirroring that messaging on site. So it's very important for the customer, once they click through or they say use coupon, then you can pull that code here and mirror the same messaging. And you can see that this design isn't very intrusive. It's kind of subtle, but it's there. They use red text to kind of call it out, like, hey, pay attention to this. But it's really just a subtle reminder to that email visitor as they browse your site, so it can follow them around the site. It doesn't have to be solely to one page. It can be. But this subtle reminder can kind of follow them around site and just remind them of the deal that they are offered. So X, I don't know if you have anything to say about that experience, but this is kind of just what we recommend in terms of making the most out of your email.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really cool that you shared the numbers of the increase in conversion rate there. It makes a lot of sense. And here too, like one thing to think about is like, as a consumer or as just a general website visitor, right, we're all kind of lazy, right? So if you, for example, have a code here, you tap through, you click through, and then you have the code still there on the site, right? It's much easier to grab and copy paste versus having to go back to email or having to remember it or something like that. So even
Exactly.
from just like small points like that, from a usability standpoint, it helps. And at the end of the day, conversion rate is really governed by these small factors that add up. So yeah, I think you hit most of the nail on the head there.
Yeah. So, and again, through the presentation, if you ever hear me say mirror email messaging, this is exactly what I'm talking about, whether it's just the actual text in the email or if it's the offer, if it's a certain percentage off, all of these little nuggets that you can grab out of that email and put on site, you will have a higher chance of conversion. The next topic I really want to address, because I see questions about this all the time in terms of when is it best to send out what campaign. And I think people get really overwhelmed about timing. So X, I'm going to kick this to you because this is where I was surprised about your email geek stuff. So
Yeah.
all of this looked very, very intense. So let's see what you have to say about timing.
Yeah, so basically the slide, we got some A/B tests going on here. And this is just a tiny sample, right? You guys don't have to digest all of the stats. The conclusion really, because we get clients who come and say, hey, should we send on Monday? Should we send on Tuesday? Should we send it in the morning or in the evening? And in short, there's no perfect time that you can just pull out of a hat. That said, like the only consistent trend we've seen with what days or times perform well or poorly is almost across the board. Saturdays kind of do worse as send days, but other than that, it's just all over the spectrum. So our one and basically only recommendation around here is test, 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 right? Like pick a morning time, pick an evening time, pick an afternoon time, pick a Friday versus a Sunday or something like that, and just really test into it, because this is actually on the top of optimization, right? One of the core tests that really can make a difference over time, because just from the difference in engagement based on send times, that can be pretty big by itself. B, is very reproducible. So if you find an optimal time is Monday at 6 p.m., like send your campaigns Monday at 6 p.m. and every time you're going to get the most out of the email. And then C is actually really easy to test. You don't have to create any more additional creative or additional content. If your ESP has a functionality, just throw up a variant and test it. And that's it. So, and track the results, of course. But yeah, so I'd say like the conclusion really on optimizing send times is test out the different send times. There might be even more advanced functionality for certain ESPs. They can optimize based on a subscriber's time zone, and also perhaps algorithm generated like send time optimization as well. So I would say even test just blanket send times against the algorithm, test the blanket send times against the subscriber time zone, just any combination you can do that. And I guarantee you're gonna get some good lift into out of your emails in terms of engagement and conversions.
And get some good knowledge about your audience. I'd be curious to hear if you would recommend people really being, well, I'm sure you would recommend this, but being smart about the times that they do test. Obviously, you wouldn't want to really do an A/B test around a holiday campaign, around holidays, unless you were trying to gather data about behavior around holidays. But, I would just be curious for certain folks that have a demographic that, I don't know, they work, during the school year and they go on vacation for the summer, or there's like a block of 2 weeks that they're out. If you guys know these data points about your audience, would you say X, that it would probably be best to just kind of use your gut to determine the best time? Like, not time is an hour, but I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say.
Period, yeah, like periods to not test or test because it might skew the data. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Jenna. And I think based on your qualitative knowledge of your audience, that comes into play in determining like whether or not I should run tests at all. I think also thinking through like, let's say these really big holiday season times like Black Friday, where there's a lot of fluctuations that it might give you counterintuitive results or counterproductive results, where if you took that and put it into regular campaigns, it might actually throw it off the wrong way. So really being aware of that, and then also like how you're segmenting too, right? So with testing, you want to make sure that, like, for example, we don't really test on resends so much because that's sending to usually a group of non-openers from the first campaign. And that's like a skewed demographic, and actually more or less like a less valuable part of the list, because they are less engaged, right? So whereas we really want to kind of look at the people who are most engaged, or our best customers, and find out what works best for them. So so definitely there's some considerations around different periods in the year or different segments, and opting out of testing on some of those.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, well, let's move on to holiday opportunities. And I liked this slide a lot, and how you segmented the holidays between gifting or general. I had never really heard of it that way, but maybe you can walk us through the differences, even though I think that's kind of an obvious split.
Yeah, so pretty intuitive, and there's a lot of different ways to view holidays, right? And this is not like a one size fits all, especially because you guys are in various different niches, right? So Mother's Day and Valentine's Day for a flower retailer is going to be like the high point of the year, right? But versus if you're selling like car parts, it probably isn't as relevant. So even there's a differentiation. But how we like to view it with this dichotomy here is really like there are holidays that are more susceptible to actually like buying stuff for, whether it's like for gifting, or whether it's like I need a barbecue grill for my 4th of July cookout, right? Or something like that. And in those cases, like you just need to be cognizant of your timing when you're sending the emails, when you're running the promos, right, and the lead up to that. So if it's something where they're actually buying your product for that occasion, then you want to be scaled out, right,
Mhm.
instead of sending like on that day, because that doesn't make sense. They don't have time to get shipping, and they don't have time to actually get it. Um, they can also craft some urgency factors around that as well. And now there are more like what we call like general holidays, which could, some of these could be gifting holidays, right? April Fools, if you sell like a, a gag gift shop, right? Like obviously that's more gifting. But for the most part, these are more holidays that happen and give you a good reason to do a promo like around that particular holiday. Do a themed send, for example, St. Patrick's Day. Very much like the green theme and all of that, and
Right.
drinking and fun and all.
Green beer.
So
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So then when and what you send is kind of governed by that. So you don't really need to send it like 3 weeks in advance, right? For St. Patrick's Day, if you don't sell something like specific to it.
Mhm.
So that's how we kind of divided it up as well.
I did notice during this past Black Friday, Cyber Monday, I was doing one of the Shopify Plus virtual meetups that they have with merchants and people from Plus. And there were a ton of questions about, hey, when do we start marketing our Black Friday offers via email? And I don't know if that necessarily fits into either of these either of these segments, but that was a question that I was curious about too, like what is the lead time for that, and maybe that's an outlier.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't have time here to get into all the intricacies of the real, like how I see it,
Yeah.
of the real holiday season, right? Like
Yeah,
that end of year push, which is just insane
that's
because you
probably a
got,
webinar in itself.
yeah, it absolutely is. There's just like so many little intricacies, and you have to like think of preempt your competitors and stuff. So,
Sure.
um, but yeah, so I do notice that like retailers are running their promos for longer and earlier
Mhm.
as the years go on, and part of that's probably to preempt some competitive pressures as well. And yeah, and so I'd say like generally for that like big end of year holiday, you really want to be aware of like like a whole slew of factors on like when you're sending, what you're sending, your deliverability, your list segmentation, your types of promos, and everything. So the best way to do that is getting in a regular pattern with like the rest of the year, and then making sure your list is clean and doing the best practices leading up to that. So the biggest failure point I've seen is when retailers like don't do anything with their email and was like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm gonna throw together a Black Friday promo or throw together a Cyber Monday promo. So most, a lot of times it's like half baked, and other times we see them just like hit spam house or some blacklist and just don't get any emails out. So um, yeah, so I guess I'll give you some party tips there, not the nitty
Sure.
gritty
Yeah,
details.
I didn't want to go into the rabbit hole, but yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds good.
yeah. Cool. So I guess on this next slide, I just wanted to outline like a little general flow potentially for something. Let's say it's a gifting holiday, right? Campaign you were running, and let's say it's like a fairly juicy offer. Usually we don't run 3 touch points if it's like just a general email or there's not a lot of offers included in there. But let's say it is a fairly juicy offer. We typically want to do maybe 3 touch points. One being the first email about, hey, here's the discount, here's the sale, and having that go maybe like 5 to 7 days before the offer actually ends. And then after that, maybe a day or two after, we want to do a reminder email, usually targeted towards non-openers from the first campaign. So this is people who presumably maybe saw it in the inbox and deleted it or just skipped it, but never actually opened and saw the content of the email. So you want to do a reminder email there fairly shortly afterwards. And then lastly, a last chance, which is really pretty strong. And a lot of times we see this perform like on par with that initial email, and sometimes actually overperform a little bit because people are driven by the fear of loss, right?
That urgency. Yeah.
It's critical here. Last day of the offer, even last hours if you're running flash sales and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, And for most part here, pretty much targeting the same as the first email. Sometimes you might want to exclude people who purchased off of the sequence just because, they just bought, they might not be prompted to do that again. But other times you actually want to include them because a lot of times people buy and then just buy again.
Mhm.
So it's not a bad idea to just send to the initial target group as well.
To everyone. Yeah. Well, yeah, I wanted to kind of piggyback off of the timing question because with our audience, we have a lot of questions about just what types of offers that people can set up. And that's what I was alluding to earlier when I said, we were going to give you guys this holiday marketing calendar. But basically our philosophy is that you should always be running an offer, and holidays are a great way for you to just throw your audience a bone, whether it's something very small. You would be very impressed about the effect that has on someone's purchase intent, because they think, oh, I'm getting 20%, which is actually quite a lot. Even if it's 10%, the effect that has on someone's decision if they're going to purchase or not is quite strong. So holidays are great. This is an example I pulled from a brand that I like their marketing. It's Chubby's. They're a shorts brand. You don't have to like it, but their marketing is pretty effective. So I was just playing around with creating an offer that they could use, and kind of showing an email that I received from them and how they could reflect that messaging on site. So you can see here what I have is an Uno bar with a countdown timer, and that's kind of like what X was talking about, this sense of urgency. So what you can do in your email sequence is, maybe your first two emails, you don't show this offer, but with that last chance email that you might send, you might set something up like this to show and reflect how long they do have to make that purchase or use that code. X, I think you guys have used some timers and offers that you set up. But yeah, this is really just a new tactic, or not a new tactic, but a good tactic to just kind of push that person along the funnel. And especially if you combine it with that last chance email or something that is, again, mirroring that messaging, then people are more likely to respond to these.
Yep, absolutely. Urgency is really critical, especially on all of these promo emails and of course the post email experience to really drive them to purchase. So.
Yeah. And you guys can use urgency in a variety of ways. Language is obviously one, buttons, but the countdown timer, it usually works better for like flash sales and things like that. And, X, when you were talking about running A/B tests, we did an A/B test for our own product, and we published this on our site. I can link up to that article. About whether it was effective or not. And for us, as a software company, it didn't really prove to be effective in the exact test that we ran. And that just goes to say, hey, you absolutely can't, compare your own company to what somebody else's company is doing, because it's totally dependent on your audience. So for us to say, hey, it didn't work for us this time, doesn't mean that this shorts company selling to, 20-year-old guys that live in Chicago it's not going to work. It probably will work. So again, run your A/B test, but make sure that you are really focusing on your own audience and not what's necessarily working for someone else. Okay, now let's talk about the best part of this, the secret sauce. So let's talk about making sales from these emails.
Yep.
X, I'll let you take it from here.
Yep, absolutely. So this kind of brings us a bit full circle here, right? So we were talking a lot about email campaigns, email marketing today on our side, and then Jenna is talking about, using Justuno to really supplement that experience post-click when people actually get on your site and increasing conversion rates that way. So really in terms of like looking at a secret sauce, I know this is like kind of high level, but nevertheless, like thinking through like, okay, we're using email here, the campaigns I'm sending, the messaging I'm sending to really do the best job possible in driving the click-through and driving people to the most relevant landing pages on the site for their experience. And then with that being said, once they land, then thinking through, okay, what is their post-click experience, right? What offers are they seeing as they land there? Are they seeing a countdown timer? Are they seeing the code there and everything? And really optimizing the conversion rate part of it. And once you have those two pieces really together, then that's going to be, the recipe to make a super powerful just sales funnel, I guess, or marketing funnel, as you will, that really drive a lot of sales.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you kind of just, illustrated this part, but as a funnel illustration or kind of just a walkthrough of really what I'm talking about, what X is talking about, is this is kind of like the user flow that we would imagine you guys implement. The email, the click through, show an offer based on UTM, and we can talk about that in a second. They're going to go to the landing page that you're sending them to. You see the same messaging in the offer, and then you have a higher chance of conversion. So the piece I wanted to show here on this image is, this is just a screenshot of our targeting rule. And for those of you that are just users, you know that we have two different abilities to build rules. So this one is from the basic builder. The advanced section looks a little bit different. I'm not going to use that today because, again, that is advanced. But we could potentially cover that in a follow-up webinar. But here, what we allow our users to do is target users coming specifically from email. We make it super easy. You see here, we have the ability to show from a source or don't show. So you want to show or you want to exclude. But today we're talking about showing a message to people who are coming from email. So all you have to do is check that box, and you can just leave it checked email. If you'd like to do that, then that's totally fine. Our system defaults to the UTM email code, so we will automatically show to that. If you want to get more granular, then you can put in your UTM codes. And I spoke about this on a webinar recently, and some people were quite confused. So a lot of you guys that, do all your marketing yourself, or you're just newbies to everything, you may not know what UTM is. I'm going to walk through that later, but it's basically some specifications you can make to your URL where you can report better on your marketing efforts. So you can define different terms like campaign, source, term, all of these things that then you can go back into your analytics program, whether you're using Google Analytics or you're using a CRM reporting. I'm not really sure what you guys are using, but you can go back and track the effectiveness of that campaign. So the cool part about Justuno is that we can show to people coming from those specific UTM codes and say, okay, these people were way more likely to convert, or these people weren't. So this is just a very powerful feature that we offer. And that's where I was talking about us coming into this nurturing phase. So now we're talking about more middle of the funnel here. And yeah, I'm going to show you guys how to set that up here just shortly, but let's look at setting up an offer from the email standpoint first, and then I'll walk you through a Justuno example.
Cool. Yeah. So real quick here, this is from one of our current clients, Frame Destination. They sell just a variety of different frames for artists, for amateur photographers, and professionals as well. And this is actually a Black Friday 15% off site-wide sale. Basically pretty straightforward with the messaging there on the hero image, a little bit of copy, a lot of call outs on the actual code, and then calls to action to actually use the coupon. So this will then drive to, in this case, probably a homepage, just because it's off site-wide. And then Jenna will be able to show you kind of after that, setting up an offer that will supplement and complement this.
Sure. Yeah. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to exit out of here, and I'm going to use X's example and copy and stuff in my example. So first, let's go over to the Justuno admin, and you'll have to pardon my account because it's a test account. So I have lots of stuff going on in here. But what we're going to do is set up an Uno bar. So first, I'm going to click here on new promotion. And we're going to give our promotion a name. So I'm just going to say 15% off and get started. Now the next screen you're going to see, it's going to prompt you to choose whether you want a desktop experience or a mobile experience. By default, Justuno asks you to choose between that because, as X alluded to, mobile and desktop perform very, very differently. And Google will value your site completely differently as well. If you're showing a desktop offer on a mobile site, it's just going to create a terrible user experience. So that's why we prompt you guys to do that. Let's click here on banner. And then you'll have an option to show it at the top or show it at the bottom. I personally like to do bottom offers a lot. The reason being that it doesn't crowd your site navigation as much. And you can also make these a lot taller if you need to, and take up a lot more space, which isn't necessarily a recommendation, but it's just a better option than crowding your users and seeing all of that. Second, we have the lead capture versus the website messaging. Lead capture is obviously going to be asking for an email, but in this instance, we're talking about, sending a message to people we've already sent an email to. So we're not trying to acquire them. We already have them. So that's going to be a case for website messaging. Please select a theme. You can start with a blank theme. I'm going to go ahead and select this one just so that we don't have to start blank for this demo. And then please select an audience. I'm going to, I can't see down there very much. I think I need to scroll down a little bit here. Yeah. I'm going to click Build Basic Audience. And this is where we're going to enter into our email rule. So first you want to select on specific page. And if you want to refine that, you can. For now, I'm just going to leave it any page because like X said, his discount is site-wide. Everything's 15% off, so I don't really want to specify. I'm just going to leave that there. Now we're going to look at to choose who. All visitors, new visitors, returning visitors. I'm just going to leave all visitors because I know I'm going to target email. And that's where we get into this piece, target traffic source. So as I mentioned, you can click email, and by default, that will target the UTM code email, or we can narrow down by campaign. This is where I was talking about UTM codes. I went ahead and pulled up Google URL Builder. So this is a free tool, and you can just Google URL Builder, and it will pull up. But it has all the necessary fields you need to create this URL. So let's just go ahead and do a test. We'll say your website is test.com. Your campaign source might be 15% newsletter. And X, I might be completely like bashing some email rules. So if I am, call me out and let me know if there's something, something better that I should be doing with UTM codes.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. I think sometimes with your ESPs, they automatically append some of the UTM parameters to your links if you click on Google Analytics link tracking, append
Great.
or something. And so oftentimes they pull in like the name of your campaign automatically as one of the UTMs. They might specifically say source equals email or source equals email newsletter. They have like probably some default values. So that's also another way to be able to just quickly see like, oh, this is how it's going to be mapped. And then you can plug that in and
pull out those terms.
Yeah, into just,
Yeah, so I would absolutely recommend if your ESP does offer that functionality, just use that because it's way less confusing for a lot of you. But what I wanted to illustrate here is how the final URL generates. So you can see the UTM material that we could pull out. We can pull out source, we can pull out medium. So you can pull these things into just, for what I'm going to do now is pull out the UTM source and just copy that. Then back in the admin, you can place that under the tracking URL contains and then just paste your value there. You can obviously add more if you'd like to, but this should suffice for what we are building right now. You have the option to add a delay, which we're not going to do. And that should be good to go. Let me move my recording screen. Okay, sorry, I need to zoom out apparently. I always feel like I have technical difficulties when I want to do a demo.
That's how it always works.
I know. Okay, well, not important. Anyways, I just wanted to show you guys that's where you can target the source from email, and then you can build, obviously, that offer to show if you were running, let me get back to X's example. If you were running this 15% off, then that's how you would create that offer to mirror only to those visitors if you were using that UTM term. So thanks for the tip, X, about just leveraging your ESP's probably automated functionality. But just so you know, that's the only piece of text that we need are those specific terms. So as long as you can grab those things, then you're good to go. Okay, cool. Well, I think that wraps it up for demonstration purposes. I wanted to go ahead and link up to the stuff that X and I are going to give you. So over in the sidebar, you can click the link for our holiday marketing calendar. That's a PDF. It's pretty lengthy, so you've got lots of good stuff to look through. And then I will also link up to X's guides. It looks like we have 3 different things for you guys to choose from. And also for you guys attending, we're going to offer you a 15% off discount any monthly paid plan. So that's pretty awesome. You guys can first sign up for a free trial, decide if you like it. Once your trial expires, if you use the code Essence15, you'll get a sweet discount off of any paid plan. And I think, X, you guys have a really great offer that you and I were chatting about before the call. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the spirit of us working pretty closely with Justuno over the years, and also in the spirit of this webinar, if you guys get in contact with us and just mention you watch this webinar, we're going to throw in a free Justuno integration with your website. So that'll include kind of setting up with your website, with your ESP, and getting you guys at least the bare bones going there so you can take advantage of everything we talked about in this webinar and get playing with it. So you can contact us. There's like, if you just go to our site, there's like 8 million contact us buttons. So maybe find us.
Pretty good calls to action. Yeah. And I would say, guys, absolutely take advantage of that, because, I think a lot of people doing email marketing on their own can get very overwhelmed with all of the boxes that you need to check to be effective. And with Justuno, we're also very easy to set up and get going, which is a great thing. And lots of you probably already have that. But in order to take your stuff to the next level, it takes a little bit more time and a little bit more work. So obviously leverage whatever opportunity you can. And I think this is a great offer. We charge people to do this too. So I think taking advantage of this is a good deal. Okay, so for Q&A, since X and I are pre-recording this, what I did is kind of seed some questions from either users or e-commerce specific forums that were really more around email marketing. And X, if you'd like to take just a few minutes to answer a few, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to.
Okay. Well, my first question is, I think you guys work with various ESPs, but do you recommend one over the other, or is that something you could kind of give us a little bit of insight into, who you guys work with the most?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously the universe of ESPs out there is huge and growing day by day. And, with the competition and the availability of providers in space, like, people move up and down, right? With someone comes out with a new feature, someone else comes out with another one, right?
Right.
For the ones that we work with most, probably comes down to MailChimp, Klaviyo, and Remarkety currently, just based on the clients we work with, their needs, and our relationships with the various platforms. And so those are the 3. And out of the 3, probably Klaviyo and Remarkety more so than MailChimp for the most part. Just from a functionality standpoint, as of today,
Yeah.
we find it to be more useful in supporting our strategies and tactics we actually want to implement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. We've seen a huge, jump in Klaviyo users as well, and we have a pretty robust integration with them too. But I would say for e-commerce, that's been kind of the one that we've seen kind of taking the lead as well. So second question, I guess, kind of leads into that. So if somebody is on an ESP, but they're not using any automation, which is possible, what do you think is the number one campaign you would suggest a beginner to set up? So, we kind of talked about lots of different campaigns today, and you guys recently published a blog post on our blog with a lot of different campaign options. It's a really great post. I'm going to link up to that right now here in the chat bar. And you outlined a lot of different campaigns, from a welcome email to replenishment email. What's the best one for a new customer, or somebody new just to automation?
Yeah, I'll do you one better. I'll give you 2. So on a pound for pound basis, basically a prospect welcome series and a card abandonment sequence. Those two are by far the ones that perform the best. And then you can always divvy up the prospect welcome based on if you want to do one flow specific for exit intent or another one for looking at the blog page and all of that. But a basic one that we, for example, we actually walk through all the elements needed to create one today is really triggered by having the email capture on site via Justuno, and then usually with a decent first time customer offer. So it could be like a 10% off, it could be $1 off, whatever works for your brand. And then following that up with a sequence, delivering the coupon code, nurturing the email address, and then ultimately at the end having reminders as well to redeem the code. Like that whole sequence performs very, very well. And then off of that, then abandoned cart. So whenever someone is abandoning the shopping cart or your site, if you're able to capture their email address via various different means, then following up with a sequence to try to get them to complete the order. Also very, very high performing, which is somewhat intuitive because they're so close to the point of purchase.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm so glad that you did me one better, because those truly echo the exact recommendations that we make. So when beginners come to us and say, I'm brand new, what offers do I set up? The number one offer is the new visitor capture. And the number two offer is an abandoned cart campaign. So obviously that works hand in hand with email marketing strategy. So that's really easy. Nice. You guys can just go set up those two offers, and then set up those two automation campaigns, and you're off to a really good start.
Nice. And we didn't even script that one.
We didn't. We totally didn't. That was last minute. Yeah. Cool. Well, then the next question I do have, I think we already covered, but I did see a couple of posts in the Shopify Plus Facebook community around best practices if someone wants to take their email automation to the next level, which the poster said, I know that sounds cheesy, but it's a legitimate question. And I think you kind of covered a few, with A/B testing and kind of testing your send times. But is there anything else you might add to that for somebody who's already up and running? They have email automation going, they understand it. What can they do to make it better?
Yeah, great question. So like you said, I touched upon a few, like always, if your ESP has the functionality, right, like always have some sort of A/B test running and maybe multiple variants on every single automated email effectively. And, but off of that, I think like there are a couple areas where you can tweak. So one would be looking at more just additions to the automated flows and automated emails. So that might be things you're missing. Right. So like Jenna said, we have a blog post that outlines like a wider universe of possible automations. And even there, we don't talk about every single combination, right? So looking at what else new you can implement, looking at your existing sequence and finding the points where it's most like the emails are being most effective, and then tweaking the content and perhaps like adding in additional touch points onto your existing sequences. And then last but not least, and actually probably in the whole order of things, something you want to look at first is diving into the metrics. So diving into the data and not being afraid of that, I think is probably from a strategic standpoint, the first thing you want to actually do. If you're really looking to kind of step up the game, because that's going to give you a lot of insight that you otherwise won't have. And instead of just like kind of willy-nilly trying to pick out like, hey, I want to maybe try this thing with the automation, try this thing, you can see like, oh, look at that. Like 50% of my repeat purchases purchased within 3 days of their first purchase. Why don't I like front load some of my automated efforts, or maybe I give them an offer at this point, and that's going to be much more effective than just trying to do a ton of things, right? So you're being very effective based on the data you have on what you're going to do, and letting that drive some of your strategy.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And it enables you to make a smarter decision, right? And I like how you said, not to be afraid of using data. I think that word is very scary for a lot of people, even, and probably, for a lot of people who are just doing their marketing on their own, and they're feeling their way through it. But what I would suggest to take the fear out of data is just to find one metric, right? Like how X was talking about earlier, just to kind of start step by step. It's the same with reporting. You can't take in all this data all at once, or you'll actually do yourself a disservice, because you'll either burn out on reading it, or you'll try to track too many things at the same time. It's just not effective. So I would suggest picking out one metric, and for email, I'm not sure what you would recommend there, X, but just tracking that for some time, and making a small tweak based off of that. Then once you understand that, go again, choose a different one, make another tweak. And, X, I don't know if that would be in line with your recommendation or not, but sometimes I think just taking a small bite really helps take the scariness out of looking at a lot of numbers.
Yep. You want to start somewhere and then gradually build your way up as you get confidence, or as you get your processes in place and everything. So doing something and getting started, probably general rule in life, but it's definitely good to at least go in, and then you can always improve later. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Okay, well, last question. I know that we've, spent almost an hour, a little over an hour here talking to you, but I wanted to know a little bit more about Essence of Email and the setup, because I think, for people wanting to take advantage of your free offer, might be wondering as well, what kind of agency is this? How do you guys run? I know a lot of marketing agencies, have packages or retainers. Some do a la carte. So can you kind of talk to us a little bit about just kind of what sets you guys apart from other email marketing agencies?
Yep, absolutely. So I think first and foremost, the fact that we are so focused on email, and also at this point, e-commerce, that in and of itself is a combination that makes us fairly unique. We're not trying to do 8 million different other channels, and there's a time and place for agencies doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for us, we really chose our battlegrounds there and really decided to go in deep. And then off of that, in terms of how we work with clients, pretty standard. So we have the kind of retainer-based, longer-term engagements where we're working much more hands-on with clients over many, many months, and other times years, to really build out the program. And then we also have the piece that's more project-based. So this is where you can pick some a la carte items. Usually we have some recommendations that we pull across, and really construct a package that's focused more on this specific project, getting these automations live, getting these templates created, getting these emails created. So we're pretty flexible across those working arrangements. And other than that, I'd say one of our key points of differentiators off of that is we also do both strategy and implementation in-house. So all of our strategic knowledge and talent, that's in-house, and also all of our people that are actually doing the implementation, the copywriters, the designers, the coders, that's all full-time on our team too. So we have a lot of control over the process, and are able to kind of propagate the knowledge that we gain perhaps from working on this campaign or this client, and get that across to the entire team, and really use that to affect and make things better across the entire base. Just like we were talking about using data.
Right.
We love data. We love looking at performance, and we have some targets for our clients in terms of return on investment, in terms of how much you pay us. We want to get you a lot more than that from the email marketing channels. So all of that kind of comes together to a point where I believe we provide a lot of value for a lot of clients. Not a fit for everybody, that's for sure, but definitely I think can be a great asset to helping you guys out.
Cool. Yeah, I love the fact that you guys are all in-house, because just, working at a software company, once you translate something from marketing to a programmer, I mean, we all know everything that could go wrong in those communication lines. So it's really great when your team is together and they can understand, the end goal. So I think that's a huge plus. Cool deal. Well, X, I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you for making time to talk to our audience about this and talk to you guys. I learned a ton today. I don't know a lot about email marketing, so I learned a lot from you, and I appreciate the time that you put in to put all this data together for us. As a reminder to all of you viewing, you have the code Essence15 on Justuno. If you want a 15% discount after you sign up for a free trial and you decide you like this, you can use that. And then if you guys want to check out Essence of Email, just go to their website, essenceofemail.com. Contact them because X told me there's a million buttons saying to do so. And just mention that you saw the webinar, and you can get a free Justuno integration. I've seen obviously the ones that they've set up for our mutual clients, and they do really good work. So I will also be emailing you guys out the replay to this. So don't worry if you missed part of it. If you couldn't make it, obviously there will be a recording. And yeah, thanks guys for making time, and thank you, X.
Thanks, Jenna. I'm glad to be able to be here, and most of all, thank the audience for spending the time here and listening to me yibber yabber about.
No, I'm sure they learned a lot. So I surely did, and yeah, it'll be good. So thanks, guys, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.